and need to change.
My Lord, I was worried following that my noble friend Lord Carrington of Fulham would in fact have taken away the very last thing that I might have said that hasn't already been said, but happily he has left a little scope for my contribution to this debate, and I can start by saying something which has been widely said, which is to offer congratulations to all my noble friends who have made their maiden speeches today, and to say how very welcome their contributions were today, and will be, I'm sure, there are many contributions in the future to the quality of debate and the experience of your Lordship's House. There has been a great number of points of consensus around the whole of the House as we've debated this, and I share those points of consensus. Amongst them, there is the astonishing lack of parliamentary scrutiny of what is in fact lawmaking, and whether this constitutes taking back control or whether it could be done better, and so forth, needs to be something that we will want to explore in committee. A second one is the need to ensure that a cash option remains available, not just for those who need it, but for those who want to exercise it. And I think there's a broad consensus on that around the House. A third point on which there is a consensus, and I don't intend to put this too controversially, is that there appears to be a shared, mild uncertainty whether the current regulators are quite up to managing the new jobs that are about to be thrust upon them, and that is something else that I'm sure we'll want to explore in committee. I'd like to add one item to that, which I hope will command widespread support in your Lordship's House, which is that over the last 20 or indeed 30 years, retail access to regulated investments has practically dried up. It used to be the case that one could buy government bonds, gilt-edged securities, at the post office. It used to be the case that one could bid non-competitively for new issues of gilts through clipping a coupon in a newspaper, even the Daily Mail, and put one's money into government bonds, a safe, secure investment that one could hold over the long term. It used to be the case that new issues of equities were widely available to retail investors. All of these having different risk profiles, but we need to have some trust that investors, retail investors, do understand to a degree what they are doing, and they do. But instead, what has been happening over the last few years is that investors with money in their pockets, which they'd like to put into savings, have been precluded by regulation from these markets and have instead put their money into dodgy schemes and things calling themselves bonds that have been marketed, sometimes giving the impression that they are regulated by financial regulators, and sometimes with sufficient justification for that claim that we have actually had to pass legislation only last year in order to authorise the Treasury to bail out the investors in one of the schemes, London and I believe it was called London Capital Growth. I may have that slightly wrong, which the word's wrong, but in the wrong order, but they're the right words. Only last year we had to bail them out. So what we're saying to investors is you're going to be regulated out of nice, secure, sensible investments, but encouraged, in effect, to go into dodgy investments, and it's all completely wrong. Now, a large part of it comes from the European Union's Prospectus Directive. What that did was, one of the things it did was to say that for investment in corporate bonds, the minimum denomination for the bond has to be, for a new bond issue, has to be 100,000 euros, and that denomination stays with the bond for the whole of its life. So unless you actually have a sum of roughly 100,000 euros, you can't buy. Most people, retail investors, obviously don't have that. That prospectus directive is in Schedule 1, it's listed to go. It's absolutely vital that we put the retail investor at the heart of this. The second thing is that new issues of equities, treasurers are discouraged from giving a retail offer in those because they have to have additional regulatory requirements to meet. We should be able to address those. All of those things could be done if they were an explicit objective of the bill and if the government committed itself to doing them. There is a working group on the Investor Access to Regulated Bonds Working Group in the City, which has been talking to the FCA about this. The working group represents the industry, and I've had some briefing from them. I have no interest to declare. There is definite opportunity, but it needs to be taken up and pressed by the government. Could I say one final thing, which is that the noble Lord Forsyth of Drumlean mentioned when he spoke the outrageous way in which politically exposed persons are dealt with inside this country in the domestic regime. Might I put it to my noble friend on the front bench that this bill, dealing as it is with financial regulation, would be the perfect mechanism for sorting that problem out for once and for all through any necessary amendment to primary or secondary legislation that is required, so that we cease to have the humiliating prospect of watching the front bench go off and beg the Financial Conduct Authority to treat us reasonably.
My Lords, I